Hello everyone, today we're going to talk about deployments. Now, I am not going to teach you how to deploy to Gigalixer or Fly. This is more of a generic tutorial where I'm gonna give you a high-level overview of all the steps that your app needs to follow in order to run in production. And maybe you clicked on this video because you wanted to know how to deploy on Fly, for example. But it's so easy to deploy to Fly that I don't think it makes sense for me to show a tutorial about that. So I'm gonna link the documentation in the description of this video. But check this out. This is how you deploy on Fly. I'm gonna teach you in 30 seconds. You're going to install the Fly CLI, then run flyctl auth login to connect to your account. And then on the root of your project, you're gonna run fly launch. That's it. That's the tutorial. If all you wanted was deploy to Fly, you can close the video now. See you next time. But if you're here for the generic tutorial, let's start. So, which steps do I need to start off if I want to deploy? The first one is generating all the environment variables. And there are specifically two that are mandatory. The first one is called secret key base. This one is important because if you're doing anything related to encryption on your Phoenix app, this will be the base key that will be used to encrypt. And the second one, which is pretty obvious, is the database URL. Now, this is mandatory if you're using Postgres. And we're not using Postgres. We're using SQLite. So if you want to have a rough idea of which variables are mandatory, you can open runtime.exs and then search for raise. This way you can quickly find which variables will raise an error if they are undefined. And as you can see here, secret key base and database path. They're both mandatory. If you don't use them, if you don't have a default value for them, it will raise an error, okay? So those are mandatory. And can I generate the secret by hand or like using a website? Yeah, sure. If you have a website that generates a super secret key, okay, go ahead. But since this is a very common practice in Phoenix to generate the secret, we actually have a generator for this, which is mix.phx.gen.secret. And we're going to run this together. So let's run mix.phx.gen. As you can see, I have a huge secret key here. And now all I need to do is type export secret key base and the key that was generated for us. So let me copy this, paste it here. Nice. Now, we don't have a database URL, we have a database path. So I'm gonna type export database underscore path equal, and then our database SQLite is at the root. So I'm gonna do this, and then you can name this whatever you want. Like this Phoenix, when it starts running, it's going to create a SQLite database. So you can name this whatever you want. I'm gonna name this shop underscore prod.db. We have shop underscore dev for local development, but of course I'm gonna generate a new one for prod. All right. The second step is installing the dependencies that are production only. So just like package.json, where you can mark which dependency is production only or dev only, you have this in Phoenix. So if you run this command mix.deps.get with this flag in the end, you're not going to install the dependencies that are dev only. Whoops. So let me copy this real quick. Paste it on the terminal. Let's install the dependencies. Nice. The next step is compiling. Now, as you can see, we're setting the environment before running this command. And this is very cool. If you want to run your Phoenix app in test mode or prod, all you need to do is type mixenv equals, and then whatever environment you want to run. And of course, if you don't use this, by default, you're going to use dev as the environment. So let me compile our Phoenix app, compile all the Elixir files. Okay. And now we need to compile the assets because, yeah, we have assets on our app. This is not a REST API only. We are managing assets on this Phoenix app specifically, but if you're building a REST API, you don't need to run this step, okay? And you can take a look at which scripts we have for managing assets in Mix. So we have mix.exs. If you search for assets dot, we have assets.setup, assets.build, assets.deploy. And yeah, you can read what they do here. So pretty much setup is going to install ESBuild and Tailwind if you don't have it. And yeah, for now, all we need is assets.deploy. Now, if you're following along with me and you have some files that you did not commit yet, I recommend you to do the commit. So git commit, git push, because this command right here is going to generate lots of files and it's going to pollute your git tree. Okay, so copy this, assets.deploy. All right, we generated one bundle for JavaScript, which is 100 kilobytes. Okay, this is looking pretty good. Now what? You can choose what to do next. And this depends on where you want to deploy your Phoenix app. Are you going to deploy it on somewhere that has Elixir and Erlang installed, like your local machine? Then proceed to this first tutorial right here. Now, if you're deploying to a VPS and you don't want to manually install Elixir there, manually install the Erlang VM, then by the end of this video, we're going to learn something very cool called releases, okay? But I'm just gonna assume that you're running this on your own computer. And on your computer, you do have Erlang and Elixir installed. All right, so first, of course, we need to run the migrations on our prod database. Migration's already up because I ran this command before. And then to run the server, you can even change the port if you want. By default, we use port 4000, but here we're using 4001. So you can use this command to just start the Phoenix server, or if you want, you can start with IEX like we always do. X-S, there you go. And we have this example.com here. We can even look for it, example.com. Yeah, so since we're not setting this phx host variable, it's showing that we're hosting the app on example.com. So you can change this if you want, but yeah, it's just a tiny detail here. Where's my Google Chrome? Now, instead of port 4000, we have port 1001. And there you go. We have our Phoenix app running. And it's working. Now, because we're using a new database for prod, we don't have any products here, right? Products. Yeah, we have no products because we created all those products inside the dev database and we created another one for prod. Okay, and that is it. Those are all the steps that you need to follow if you want to deploy Phoenix and Elixir on a server or computer that has those things installed. Now, this is not very practical. Imagine this, every time you do deploy, maybe you updated the Elixir dependency on your computer, and then you forgot to SSH on your Linux VM, and now you need to, you have some conflicts with the Elixir version, Erlang VM version. This would be horrible, right? A horrible developer experience. Now, what if there was a way of self-containing Elixir and the Erlang VM inside a single, like a binary of some sorts? Is there a way to do that? Yes, there is. There's a thing called releases, which is a feature not from Phoenix, but from Elixir. It's a way of installing the dependencies, compiling the Elixir code, and downloading the Erlang VM and the Elixir inside a single directory. One directory, okay? And then you can copy this directory, paste it anywhere. You can push this to a server, any server. You don't need Elixir installed. You don't need Erlang installed. You just run a script that is generated by the Phoenix, the Elixir release process. So if you want to do Elixir release, you still need to follow all these first steps here. You need to generate the secrets. You need to compile your code, install dependencies, compile the assets. This is all necessary, okay? And then we have this very handy generator from Phoenix that generates a release. But I'm not going to run this one specifically. I'm going to run the second option, which is way more interesting. If you want to package your app into a single directory, this is pretty much perfect for Docker, right? Imagine you have a Docker file that describes the entire release process and then in the end generates this single directory that you can run anywhere. That would be perfect. So we can run just the release command, but for now, I'm going to run this with the Docker flag in the end. This way we can better understand how each step is going to work. And yeah, it's fetching the latest image from Docker Hub, which I don't have. To be honest, I don't even think I have Docker installed on this machine. I'm just using the Postgres app, which is way simpler. Okay. And then to finish running your release, you can run mix release. But as you can see here, we have a bunch of commands that you can run. For example, if you want to start your server, your Phoenix server, you're going to run inside this build directory, and then dev rel shop bin, we have this server script that you can run. If you want to run migrations, you can run this one. And you can do all of this without Elixir, without Erlang, without mix, without anything. You can simply run this command because it is self-contained inside the build directory, okay? But let's inspect the Docker file that was generated here. The most interesting thing that I wanted to show you guys is this. Now, first we install, we need the Elixir version, the OTP version. Then we grab an image that has both of these installed. We set the environment to prod. And then we compile everything. We do the assets deploy. We run mix compile, which is pretty much all the steps that I showed you here. So until now, this Docker file is pretty normal. And the magic happens here. Now, at the end of the Docker file, you can find a step that a new build stage that will generate the final image. And then this will have that compiled folder that I mentioned. So in the end, you're not going to have Elixir or Erlang available on the machine because we want a clean and slim machine with just the minimum necessary to run your code. So from this final step, as you can see, we're just installing a bunch of generic stuff on the Linux machine, setting the locale, the language, setting the environment variable, and then running app bin server. There you go. That's it. Now, if you don't want to generate the Docker file yourself and you are deploying to Fly, Fly also generates the Docker file for you. So if you are deploying to Fly, you don't even need a Docker file. You're just going to run Fly and deploy, is this right? Fly launch. After you run Fly launch, it is going to generate a Docker file. But if you're not deploying to Fly and you do want a Docker file and you don't want to generate it by hand, then you can just run mix phx gen release -- docker, which was the command that we last used. And that's pretty much it. Now you're ready to deploy on any VPS. Ready to go. That's it. Thanks for watching. See you next time.